This episode of our podcast is brought to you by Dulaban Insurance. If you live in Ontario, Canada, and are looking for the best price and coverage for your Tesla, give Dulaban a call at 1-855-385-4226 or visit their website at dulabaninsurance.com/Tesla. Keep your voice down. You want to close the door and keep the cat out? No? Oh, it's going to be a real interesting evening, that's for sure. All right, folks, welcome to the Tesla Owners Podcast for June 25th. I really got to get in the habit of putting the dates in there. I get so many people telling me, you should put the date in there. So, well, there you go. All right, joining me as usual is Mr. Ian Pavelko and Eric Camacho. How you guys doing?
Bonsoir monde.
Hello, world.
Hello, world. Love that one. Well, unless you've been living under a rock, Tesla did their Q2 earnings call yesterday, and, well, the good news and the bad news. So the good news is that they're not out of business. They are not bankrupt. I'm going to read you some stuff from the PDF, and we'll have a short discussion on this. We are not financial people at all, but we're going to do our best here to try and cover some of the important stuff. So Tesla reported in their shareholder letter that cash and cash equivalents of $5 billion. That's the highest that's ever been with Tesla. GAAP operating loss of 167 million, GAAP net loss of 408 million, including 177 million of restructuring and other charges. Auto gross margin is at about 19% in spite of reductions in vehicle average selling price and lower regulatory revenue, and they're still on track to launch the Gigafactory Shanghai by the end of 2019 and Model Y production to start in the fall of 2020. So just a little bit more stuff here. As a result of this growth and operating improvements, we ended the quarter with $5 billion in cash and cash equivalents, the highest level of Tesla's history. This level of liquidity puts us in a comfortable position as we prepare to launch Model 3 production in China and Model Y production in the U.S. We're making progress on our next major update, Enhanced Summon, which is currently in our early access program. First rule of early access program, don't talk about early access program. All right, they say they're making progress towards stop signs, and traffic lights. This feature is currently operating in shadow mode. We've heard this before. Tesla sometimes sends out the software updates, and they use it for, well, they say here, which compares their software algorithm to real-world driver behavior across tens of millions of instances around the world. They use the differences between that to be able to train their AI. So that's good. We should be seeing that. Early access program, yeah, we'll see. Probably another, well, they did say, what was it, about August, mid-August for that, if all goes well. So just keep that in mind again. It is Tesla time, so you never know what's going to happen with that. So anyways, they go on to say that during the quarter, a majority of orders continue to be for long-range battery option, and the Model 3 average selling price was stable at approximately $50,000. I have a feeling the mix might change now that the P3Ds come down in price.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see what's going on with that. Let me make sure that my camera's on the right thing. Okay, very good. Okay, now they went on to talk about the Gigafactory in Shanghai. The Gigafactory in Shanghai will be a simplified, more cost-effective version of our Model 3 with approximately a capacity of 150,000 units per year, the second generation of the Model 3 production process. Now, in the shareholder letter, they gave us a picture. And these are the first pictures, official pictures, and they're grainy, and I apologize here because they didn't give us, it was embedded in a PDF. So anyways, so there is a picture of some large stamping presses on the left-hand side and some robots on the right and the bottom and on the left. So can't really make out too many details of what's going on, but it certainly shows that they're making incredible progress on the interior of the factory to get it ready for production. So needless to say, we're not going to see too much more progress on this thing because largely the shell's built. So now all of the effort is really based on the inside. Okay, speaking of which, let's move on here. Model Y. They say preparations for Model Y production in Fremont began in Q2, so it was largely last month. We heard about that. Due to significant overlap in components between Model 3 and Model Y, we knew that. They share about 3/4 of the parts, supposedly. They were able to leverage existing manufacturing designs in the development of Model Y production facilities. Due to the large market of size of SUVs as well as higher average selling prices, we believe Model Y will be a more profitable product than the Model 3. Duh, doesn't take a... North American market, right? We want our SUVs. Then they went on to talk a little bit about infrastructure. As our fleet continues to grow, our service and supercharger capacity continues to expand. In Q2, we added 101 vehicles to our mobile service fleet and opened 25 new store and service locations, which is unusual because, last time they said that they were going to cut back. Anyways, it's Tesla. They change their minds like people change their underwear. Let me see here. Supercharger capacity has grown to roughly 1,600 charging locations worldwide. Now, that's locations, it's not actual stalls. We expect the average charging session at our powerful V3 superchargers will drop to about 15 minutes, which will effectively double the overall throughput rate per stall, compared to our V2 superchargers, easily keeping pace with our fleet growth. So those are the salient points. I think there's some little bit of stuff we can dive in here. One of the things that caught my eye, even though they didn't post a net profit in this case, they're still spending money, but again, we've said it before, if they stop spending money on growth, they would be immediately profitable. But there is a little something, and they alluded to it in the conference call. Let's see here. It's on page 7, liabilities and equity. Deferred revenue, $883 million, up from the end of Q4 2018, which was $630 million. Now, Elon did say in the call that they are deferring revenue for FSD. If they were to release that and actually recognize that revenue, I think the numbers would be significantly different. Now, my opinion here is how much of that revenue is based on the current version of FSD that they're selling as opposed to when they started offering it back in 2016 when the new computer, not the current computer, but the previous 2.0 actually went into production. So, I think that's an important number to keep in mind, that they are deferring some of this revenue for later on. Some people are surmising, and I saw it on Twitter today, that they may... look, opinions are different on this. Does enhanced summon, which is one of the major features of FSD, supposedly for those who bought it after the changeover, does that count as true FSD? Like, is that when they're going to start recognizing the revenue? Any opinions on this? Do you guys think that that's actually the first part of that? Like, to me, enhanced summon is more like, this is my opinion here. I'll just say it very quickly here. It's more of it's a pony trick. It's not like using navigate on autopilot in the city. To me, once that comes along, that's the first inclinations of FSD. That's my personal opinion. What do you guys think?
Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, kinda. You're right. I mean, because it's not even a true FSD trick. It's an EAP. I
think it's important to remember for those of you who might be new to the podcast or might be new to the show, might be new to Tesla. On March 1st of this year, Tesla had completely rejiggered their autopilot program. So there used to be enhanced autopilot and then FSD, and then they've switched it. Now all the cars have autopilot, and then now you have to pay extra for FSD. You always had to pay extra for FSD, but the features were completely jumbled. They were always the other way around. So enhanced summon was always part of enhanced autopilot before the changeover, and now to get that you have to pay the extra for FSD. So anyways, continue on, Ian. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, so to me, I mean, this is my logic. I don't know if it applies, but the way I see it is anything that's up to the maximum that EAP can do isn't truly an FSD feature. I mean, yes, FSD includes those features as well, but the minute it starts going beyond anything that EAP will ever be able to do, then I think we've got some true FSD features. That's how I see it. Like, this ability to recognize stop signs and start doing things like that, you're not going to get with EAP. So that's sort of the demarcation zone for me.
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, how do you see it?
I sort of see the same thing. Although I'd venture to guess that because people like myself are grandfathered in with EAP as we've come to know it, I would stand to reason that enhanced summon would fall into that category. So monetizing it, I'm not sure if it's going to be across the board or how their calculations are going to be set. But I think we've seen so far with Navigate on Autopilot, or NOA, that some of those early releases were indicative of, this is now the early stages of FSD, especially when you had the on-ramp, off-ramp navigation component to it. Enhanced Summon, I think, is probably the next phase of the process. But beyond that, it's hard to know. I mean, I would think that even now with the shadow mode discussion, which we'll kind of dive into a little bit further into the podcast, those sort of things, when the cars can navigate city streets as well as they do highways with stop signs and traffic lights, that also, I think, is going to be a big step forward. I think until full self-driving is, in fact, fully capably installed, I think, and once they kind of pass the regulatory approval process part of it, I think really then that's where we're going to see these numbers take off. For now, we're seeing bits and pieces. Whether or not that's going to allow them to, release the full figures, we'll wait and see. I think they're being smartly conservative here. Again, we're not professional analysts, but I think they're being smartly conservative, which will. And look, I'll kind of opine this, but if you think about where they were in Q2 2018, that was make or break for them. I mean, their expectations for Model 3 fell short. In fact, their goals for weekly production for Model 3 in Q1 weren't even hit in Q2. Or at least maybe not till late in Q2. So where they were a year ago to where they are today, they're in a very strong position. The Tesla bears are sort of eating their just desserts, if you will. But yeah, I think this report, even though some figures might be shy of where we'd like them to be, they're doing very well. They're prospering. They're in a strong position, and I think as time moves forward, these next 6 months of the year, especially now in Q3 with still strong reports coming out so far in July, I think they're in really good positions.
If they can pull it off, and they did say later on in the Q&A session with Elon, he mentioned that going into next year, the second half of next year the numbers are going to look significantly different.
Yeah.
Like once things really get going and stuff, that they will be immensely profitable. So looking forward to that.
And really quick before you move on, we mentioned this before the show, but their capital expenditures, or what we call CapEx in stock terms, is actually lower than projected for Model Y. So in other words, they're not spending an exorbitant amount of money in Model Y phasing so far, which is a really strong performance indicator of how they're going to do heading into 2020.
Excellent. Well, that's a good segue, because now we're going to talk about Model Y, because there are some important bits of information that have just come out this week. Well, actually, one piece of information that they did say, again, just to reiterate for some of you who are thinking about like where are they going to build the Model Y, the original plan was to go with the Gigafactory. They did reiterate in the financial call, or the earnings call, that they were able to move some of the warehousing for S and X part storage kind of either in different facilities or off-site, so that frees up an immense amount of space for them to be able to do the Model 3 or the Model Y production in Fremont. So I just want to make sure people understand that that's where that's coming from. But having said that, there were 2 patents that Tesla was granted this week, which are really geared for Model Y. Now, I think some of this stuff may eventually make it to other cars, but if you remember, I think it was as much as last year, perhaps the year before, when they started talking about Model Y, Elon had said during the call that they were hoping to be able to build robots to be able to do more things, more automation on the cars. Of course, that never really materialized to the extent that they wanted to do on the Model 3. Witness our very first podcast titled Flufferbot, where they had to take Flufferbot out of the mix. But now they finally have been granted a patent specifically for the Model Y. And this article comes courtesy of our friends at Inside EVs. The Model Y is going to get a revolutionary wiring system. Now, Elon had said many times before that they wanted to reduce the wiring in their cars. Now, Model 3 has about 1.5 kilometers of wiring. Model S and X is somewhere in the vicinity of 3 kilometers. They want to get this down to about 100 meters. Now, I'm not going to sit here and read you the whole patent, but there are some important bits in here that have come from this. And I'll put up a screen snapshot here. This picture here, and I apologize if you're listening to the audio podcast, you may have to hop on YouTube to watch this to see exactly what I'm talking about. But one of the diagrams shows a way of interfacing 2 separate cable mechanisms in such a way that they have a self-centering connector, much like a Molex connector, but this is set up in such a way that robots could actually click these together without having to be 100% precise. Wiring harnesses in cars, if you've ever worked on them, are notoriously bad.
They're a pain in the ass, is what
they're
they
a pain
are.
in the butt, exactly. And they're designed really for people, because that's what people do. So in this case, with this new patent system, is that they develop the connectors in such a way that they're self-centering. So when the robots put the pieces together, they don't have to be exactly precise. They can be pretty close, and they have almost like an Apollo capture mechanism. You know, when the spacecrafts come together, they've got a drogue, and then they've and the probe and the drogue. Oh yes, the probe and drogue. Well, you know, we're all space nuts, right? So, anyways, it's largely the same thing. I'll put a link again into the video in the podcast description. You guys can look at these patents and stuff. But I think it really goes to show that Tesla's really moving forward. The other thing that interests me as part of this, of course, when you're reducing a wiring system down to, say, 100 meters, I think what this is portending, if that's the word I'm looking for, is what Tesla seems to be doing here is that they're reducing the amount of wires in the car. So what that leads me to believe is that they're using some kind of new communication system. Call it Ethernet, if you will. I don't know 100%. But it seems that they're moving more of the body modules where you could put the endpoints, meaning the parts that actually do the decoding from the digital signal. I'm assuming here this is going to be a digital system here at this point, where they put those body modules, let's say in the tail lights or the doors or whatever the case may be, even though cars have that, but they're still analog, largely analog. In this case, what they could be doing is they could significantly reduce the amount of wires and then put them on flat tracks, and that's what this is showing here, that the wires are more laid out on a flat track. Anyways, Ian, you're in the automotive business. I mean, you've been working on cars for just as long as just about anybody I know. What are your thoughts about this? Have you taken a look at it?
Yeah, my mind was blown. It looks definitely much more like something you'd expect to see in a computer system, in a spacecraft. I don't know what, but it looks nothing like any wiring system I've ever seen in a car. And obviously, the communication system is going to be key. That's exactly it. Because the whole point with, we went from having millions of wires in completely analog system cars where literally every single bulb, actuator, whatever, had to have its own little dedicated wire, to being able to use multiple or having the same wire for multiple devices, which is commonly referred to as a CAN bus system, where basically there's like a coded address for each one of the devices, and the ECU will send out this coded address, and that'll determine whether or not when you hit your door switch it opens the sunroof or the window or whatever. So that's the early version of it, where we saw some reduction. This is like an order of magnitude reduction from that. So I'm going to be fascinated to see the details of it. But even the shape of the connectors, the shape of the wiring is laid out. Like they're going for these, sort of rectangular shaped wires to improve the conductivity, to improve the efficiency of the conductor. So like absolutely everything has been optimized in it. It's like, as you said, Trev, I think it's worth looking at the YouTube to see the diagram. We're just looking it up through the link to see what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up some of the diagrams here. You guys can't see them, but viewers can. Yeah, this is really interesting.
What I was going to say was, so doing the math here, you're looking at around 93-ish% reduction in wiring from the Model 3 to the Model Y. But the other thing, too, that's interesting about this is really the amount of savings this is for Tesla.
Cost reduction, for sure.
So in terms of, and again, we're talking numbers here like we did in the first segment, but we're looking at basically scale economy when it comes to something like this. So with every manufacturer, every company, even like airlines, when they think about, like this was a big story with, I think it was with Delta Airlines, when they got rid of, I want to say it was olives in their salad, that saved them like hundreds of thousands of dollars in expenditures. So imagine you're taking So imagine you're taking 93% of your wiring out of the car. So now you're spending less money on your wiring. You're actually reducing the weight of the vehicle, which helps the performance of the vehicle on its own. You're saving billions of dollars in scale economy. And on that alone, it's like, hey, look how much more money we now have in our kitty, to be able to use for other things. So that's a really big, innovative idea. And if Tesla can find a way to pull it off, I guarantee you manufacturers in every market we can think of, from the tech sector, automotive, whatever it is, are going to look at this and go, why did we not think of this before?
Yes.
But
it's went through my mind,
You do have to remember the automotive industry is very much set in their ways. There's not a lot of, there's a little bit of movement and stuff, but there's nothing really revolutionary, right? In this case, I think Model Y, and in addition to the next part we're going to talk about, which is the next patent they were granted, is truly going to be a revolution in vehicles in terms of model manufacturing, but also the wiring system. Elon had also said too, and that wasn't mentioned in the call, but I do remember a couple years ago when they were talking about this, that one of the things they wanted to do was upgrade the voltage in the car. So, most cars run on, all cars today run on a 12-volt system. I think the number mentioned, they wanted to double it, go to 48 volts.
Quadruple.
No, that's a quadruple. Sorry, yes, to a 48-volt system. I think Elon was saying something like, "Well, why do we have to do that? It limits us too much." So we'll see whether that actually comes to fruition and what kind of advantages that gives us. But that was mentioned.
Trev, just to, if you go back and read the article, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought a part of this system was they were going to try and eliminate the 12-volt system completely. Everything is going to run directly off the high voltage battery. That's, I believe, what I read. We'd have to go back and look.
I'd have to read it a little bit more.
But that struck me. But anyway, to be verified. But
verified.
That's what I saw.
That makes sense.
But that's
anyways.
I want to mention one more thing because Eric brought on a very good point about the cost, the reduction in this. And this keys into something that, I don't know if you guys caught it, but during the earnings call, they mentioned they think they can get the cost of the Model Y to parity with the Model 3, which is amazing. I mean, they were talking about, like a 10 or 15% difference in the pricing of the vehicle. If they can get the cost to be the same, there's a huge margin gain for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll make it extremely attractive.
Yep.
Yeah, so all of you who are thinking about placing an order for a Model Y, given, of course, with the price reductions that Tesla's done recently, just give them your deposit, but don't worry about the price because things will change by the time they get around to production. All right, so the next patent we want to talk about that was granted, and this one article comes from Clean Technica, our good friends at Clean Technica. Well, Tesla has been granted an application for patent for a die-cast unibody machine. Now, this is something that was discovered, or we found out, when Ryan McCaffrey did his podcast with Elon recently on episode 200 of his Ride the Lightning podcast. You're dead to me if you don't listen to his podcast in addition to ours. Anyways, Elon had said that they wanted to be able to take the car down from 70 panels. Now, I'm reading into this as the subframe of the car. It should be mentioned that all Teslas have a certain amount of castings, largely around suspension parts, arches. If you look underneath the car, there are a certain amount of castings on those cars. So it's not unusual for Tesla to do this. But what they're doing in this case is that they're going to, and I'm going to say this at this point, I think what they're leaning towards, and he did mention on the podcast that they were looking at going from 70 parts down to 1, which is largely a pan, or the bottom part of the body that will comprise the rails and most of the suspension attachment parts and stuff, as being a cast piece. I'm not saying that this car is going to turn into HotWheels where the whole thing is cast. That I don't think that lends itself too well, because you still have to have smooth body panels on the exterior, and you can't do castings that are really smooth. Not without spending huge amounts of labor, of course, which of course is counterproductive to getting the cost down on the car. Let me just bring up one of the pictures here that they laid out. Now, if you can make sense of this thing, I don't know. It's going to be a big machine. Now, if anybody's ever been in a factory that's looked at plastic ABS injection type molding machines, you know how big these things can get. This thing is on another level entirely. I don't know how many of these things they plan on actually installing at the factory, but I would suspect probably more than one. Anyways, it's a really, really interesting. And now, Ian, you wanted to talk about this. I can't make heads or sense of this thing.
Well, yeah, the one thing is when you look at the schematic, it immediately brings to mind, Elon's description last year of the alien dreadnought, right? It's just this giant Borg-like device with runners for casting, entries and exits and all sorts of stuff. But what fascinated me about it is the fact that they're going to use it for the chassis and to some degree the entire unibody structure of the car. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, that's always been done with stamped metals, and stamped metals or hydroform now in a lot of cases, which is just a fancier way to sort of shape the metal under pressure, have very specific mechanical strength properties. And a casting is quite different. Castings tend to be very brittle. I mean, what's nice about a stamped piece is it has a certain amount. It can be very, very strong, and depending on how you corrugate it is a crude word, but the way you fold it, sort of origami, like you can make it strong in certain directions, but still very thin and flexible in others. So you can really adjust the dynamics of the part to suit, the section of the chassis that you're working with, especially when they weld them together into these box sections, they become very strong and very light. A casting is a whole other animal. So obviously they know what they're doing. I do not. I'm just sitting back here armchairing this thing, but I'm having a hard time figuring out how you could do an entire unibody structure, like the skeleton of the car, completely as a casting. Now, maybe this is in its infancy, and they're going to start with, if I remember exactly how Elon explained it on Ryan's show, he was talking about the rear section the rear chassis section, the rear subframe section of Model Y. So maybe they're going to start out small with, what would be essentially all of the components, that the suspension anchors to. So the whole rear half of the chassis, and then work their way out from there. But there's clearly illustrations, if you look at all of the different possibilities described in the patent, where they could do pretty much the whole unibody structure of the car, everything except for the exterior skin. So, I'm dying to see how it works in practice. The only thing that's a little bit fearful is what a few of the articles have mentioned is what happens to crash repair.
Exactly.
Because typically, when you have these sub-assemblies, that are many, many parts that are welded or bonded or glued, whatever, bolted together, when it comes to an accident where a whole section has been crushed in, you can just cut it or, weld on or bond on a new part. If it's a casting, that really limits the possibilities. Now, again, some people have said, well, this is Tesla. They're not dumb. They're going to figure out some way to section it, perhaps, where you can cut away and bolt on or bond a new part. But this is stuff I'm dying to see. I really want to know how this works, because on paper, it's like, this is bizarro.
Yeah. Well, I think it just, like I said before, it just kind of falls into Model Y being a very revolutionary car from a manufacturing aspect and some of the things that it's going to do. I mean, the car is going to look normal from the outside, but this kind of falls into line with what they want to do. Again, it falls into, capital expenditures. When you have a machine like this that makes the parts, you don't need as many robots now at this point. They can be repurposed for something else, right? So that kind of also leads me to believe, like, how much of this car, given that this new manufacturing is actually going to be producible on the existing 3 line? Or is it just the finishing? Like, you do the separate body in white, much like they do for S and X, and then final assembly, or general assembly as they call it, will be the interior stuff and so on and so forth. So
can I be the voice of reason here for just
Please
1
do.
second? Just because a patent has been filed doesn't mean it's actually going to end up being used.
True.
So it's entirely possible this whole entire thing is just a pipe dream, and it never makes it into their factory. Because the questions we're being asked today, like if any one of us was a mechanical engineer, we'd kind of know what's going on. And last I checked, we're not. So
I just play one on TV.
Right, exactly. And
even
even then,
Holiday Inn Express.
even then, that's not really going to help you. So I would say let's take a breather here on that one for just a moment, because there are many men working for Tesla, smarter than the 3 of us combined, that sort of know this stuff. They obviously wouldn't be filing this patent if they didn't have an idea that it could work. But in practical measures, this might not be a thing that comes to fruition. So if it doesn't, that's okay, because there's thousands of patents filed all the time that never become reality. So that's all I wanted to add.
If they were to do this machine, keep in the back of the mind, there's going to be a lot of teething issues. So that could also end up with some delays. So just keep that in mind. This is not Tesla's first rodeo. Delays are kind of part of the program for most of these new programs. So, anytime they try to do something different, there's a lot of teething issues. Now, the rest of the car, could be ramped up fairly quickly, because, if you're sharing 75... Where my camera went crazy there. If the rest of the car is sharing 75% of the parts, well, that's stuff you don't really have to worry about. So,
yeah, if they can get it to work, that's great, because it's going to save time, money, energy, the whole thing. But die casting also makes components like metal a little bit more brittle.
Yeah, it's brittle.
So there's a lot of questions at play here. I'm sure they've already figured this stuff out in small ways, but it'll be interesting to see how this develops over the coming year.
Can't wait to somebody doing a body wrap on a Model Y that says HotWheels on the side, right?
Look at the S-Car go.
Hey, look at that S-Car go. All right, our next article comes courtesy of our friends at Teslarati. It appears, and this is not confirmed yet, but Tesla is looking to build some lithium battery raw material factory in Indonesia. This was recent comments by Maritime Affairs Coordinating Minister Luhut Binsar Panjaitan. I hope I said that properly. I apologize if I didn't. Who named Tesla as one of the companies that are reportedly looking into building battery facilities in the region. Speaking at the presidential palace in Jakarta on Tuesday, Panjaitan mentioned that the contemporary Amprex technology and LG would also be operating their own facilities in the Morowali area. This does not surprise me. Tesla's a secretive company, but they did kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit at the shareholders meeting that they wanted to be, what's the word they use? I'm going to use masters of their own domain for lack of a better word.
Kings of the
And
castle.
those of you who are Seinfeld fans will get that reference. Anyways, no, I think masters of their destiny is what they actually use. But anyways, this is more funny. Anyways, again, it falls into what they wanted to, have control over their ultimate destiny, and that really ties into them building their own battery cells independent of Panasonic. So by building their own processing, which is lithium carbonate and so on and so forth, really gets their cost down and gets their supply chain. So we will find out more about this as time goes on, because Elon did say also at the earnings call that the battery investor day, if that's the word they want to use, looks like it will probably happen around March of 2020. It's going to be a big show and tell. They're going to be talking about cell chemistry, module construction, battery packs, a whole bunch of new stuff. So that one I'm really looking forward to seeing what they pull out of their hats. Any thoughts on this?
Nothing for me.
No. Oh, speaking of which, and we do have to mention this, and I almost forgot, our good friend JB Straubel, who's been with Tesla right from the beginning. He's the battery technology guy. Is not leaving the company. He's changing his role. He was the CTO, Chief Technology Officer. He is now becoming a senior advisor. So he's not necessarily leaving the company, but he's diminishing his role at the company. The baton is being handed off to Drew Baglino. Now, Drew was on stage at the shareholders meeting, so that was kind of a neat little segue. If you go back and look at it, it was pretty obvious what they were doing. They were trying to get the right people in line so people understood what's going on. So we want to wish JB the best. He's a great guy. He's very quiet. He's always been the guy in the background. He's an absolute genius. So, and even Drew's been with Tesla right from the beginning. He's been there since 2003. So I think it bodes well. I mean, I don't know if that's affected the stock so much, but, and of course, the shorts are going to make a big noise about, another executive's leaving Tesla. Oh, gosh, whatever. Anyways.
But I wonder exactly where he's going, because it wasn't clear in the conversation like what his next move is. He's staying on, as an advisor, but is he kind of going into semi-retirement? Has he got something else on the boil? I'm very intrigued by this.
Spend more time with his family. We've heard that one before.
Look,
who knows?
Yeah. I do not understand on a philosophical level why this actually even effing matters.
Of course,
Johnny Ive leaves Apple, and it's a news story for 5 minutes. JB Straubel leaves Tesla, and it's like the world is ending. Like the absurdity of the amount of coverage. Like, it's okay. He's been around the company for how long? Like, it's the guy can actually go on vacation. Let him do whatever he wants now. Like, it's the idea. Like, if Elon leaves Tesla, now we have a story. Now it's a big deal. But for any other executive of any position, like, they're allowed to do whatever they want. People have come and gone. The company's still here. It's not that big a deal. Companies have changeover all the time. Executives have come and gone at Google and Facebook and Yahoo and all the major telecom companies and entertainment companies and the Disney and everything. Like, it's not that big a deal. But again, the spotlight, the little, magnifying glass on the ant pile is always on Tesla. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, it's not, folks, it's not that big a deal. It really is not. Everything is a gosh darn story.
Well, Aaron, I'm gonna disagree slightly, because JB is not quite like anybody else. There's been a lot of plug and play executives. I mean, a lot of talented people that have come and gone, but they have fairly generic talents, shall we say. JB's very specific. I mean, this guy is core. I would say, him and Franz and Elon are the three key guys, in the last 10 years that have made things happen.
Well, Jerome too.
Jerome too? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of go down the chain. The thing is, the reason I when I say I'm depressed about it is because I just genuinely like the guy. I think he's such an amazing contributor, and he's very humble. That goes a long way with me. Here's a guy that says virtually nothing, takes no credit himself. He's always talking about the team, and he's done so much for them. But what mitigates that, and then coming back to your point to reinforce what you're saying, is apparently this guy who's coming up to replace him, Drew, is extraordinarily talented. Right. He's been hand in hand working with JB all these years. So you have to think there's been a huge brain transfer from him to Drew. So that gives me, a lot of confidence, and that sort of makes the point of the stories ridiculous. So yes, JB leaving, you have to think, because of the significance of his role, it should be talked about. But in the same articles, they should be saying, well, look, the guy coming up is super talented as well, so we shouldn't be that concerned.
The thing is that talent comes and goes, and companies all across the world, you rarely see a drop off because of that. I mean, there are some exceptions where maybe a new COO or CEO comes in and takes the company in a different direction. Things don't go well, and of course, now the board of directors says sayonara. When Steve Jobs and Apple were synonymous terms, when Steve Jobs was basically giving the company to Tim Cook, a lot of people questioned both publicly and privately, can the company survive? And Apple is one of the most profitable companies in the world. So yes. Right. Well, I mean, it's usually like between the top three. It kind of changes positions from time to time. But the point is, that this changeover happens. This stuff is inevitable. There will come a day, hopefully not in our lifetime, where Elon Musk is not at SpaceX. He's not at the Boring Company.
No!
But when that happens, you have a plan. You have a plan in place that's going to transfer a position where someone's going to come up the ranks, and actually things will be a seamless transition. That's just what it is. So yes, JB is a talented individual, but Tesla has tons of talented people in their architecture from the top down. Even some people at our local stores and service centers are really talented people that work for Tesla. So yeah, JB has been one of the foundational team members there, but life goes on, man. I'm with you on what he's meant to the company, but again, there's people behind him that are just as talented, if not more so. They're going to keep that going.
FineLab has a line of protective coatings that were engineered to protect your Tesla's paint, leather, carpet, plastic, and wheels, effectively blocking all those UV rays and environmental factors before they ever get to ruin your brand new baby. FineLab offers a complete line of car care products and ceramic coatings for both the do-it-yourselfer and professional detailers. Did we mention we also have the world's first self-healing coating? Check us out at finelab.com, that's spelled FEYNLAB, to see the science behind the self-healing. Check out our product catalog and click Contact Us for a free quote from a certified installer in your area. FineLab and Tesla. We were meant for each other. Moving along here, we were actually going to spend a little bit of time here and talk about another article, courtesy of our friends at Teslarati, which is talking about the Autopilot stop sign traffic light recognition is actually operating in shadow mode, so to speak. But we kind of mentioned it at the top of the show. I'll put a link in the video description, and you guys can jump in and take a look at that if you want later on. Again, the article doesn't make any mention, and Tesla didn't make any mention as to what version of the firmware that this is currently operating in. So if anybody knows out there, let us know. I'm going to jump on the forums after the thing and just see if there's any reports of this stuff. There are some people out there who like to dig into this stuff and figure things out. So if we find out, we'll try and report it as soon as we can. So they say it's operating in shadow mode, but they didn't say whether it's here today or not. All right, the next one, I think, Eric, you want to talk about this one here because courtesy of the Orlando Sentinel, electric charging stations are coming to the Florida's Turnpike.
Yes, absolutely. So we know about Dieselgate, which essentially was the Volkswagen emissions case that was eventually settled with different countries. The U.S. being one of those litigants in the case. And the U.S. got a share of different monies, and Florida, it was actually getting a cut of that, has a $166 million share of the settlement in total. So that's about, I think of that money, about 15%, or about $25 million, was designated, earmarked, for electric vehicles infrastructure.
So it's the Electrify America thing, right?
Right, and that's part of it too. So they're all part of the process there. So what the state of Florida announced on Wednesday, so this is yesterday from when we're taping the show, Ron DeSantis, who's the governor of Florida, he decided to, with his team, make an announcement saying that they're going to basically electrify the entire turnpike. Now, the turnpike itself now has two major rest stops where there are charging stations. One of them is in Fort Drum, and the other one's in Turkey Lake. So those have Tesla charging stations where you can drive in, plug in your car, and then keep going. Now, the cool thing is the state of Florida has an agreement with Tesla to provide free charging at those stations. So you're paying to drive the turnpike, you get free charging there. So what they're going to do now is they're going to have level 3 charging stations throughout the turnpike from the northernmost station, which is called and I know this is funny, but it's Humpka. That's the northernmost station. That's the mile marker.
Hunka chunka.
Yeah, Humpka. That one's at mile marker 299. All the way down south to Snapper Creek, which is at mile marker 19, and that's basically in Miami-Dade County, towards the very end of the turnpike. So the Snapper Creek has one level 2 charging station there, so that's currently there. Okahumpka is going to have 2 level 3 charging stations from Duke Energy, which is one of the electric companies that provides power in Florida, the larger one being Florida Power and Light, or FP&L, as some people call it. And they're also going to have additional Tesla fast chargers there. And again, some of these stations that already have charging, like Turkey Lake, will get additional charging stations. So they currently have, at Turkey Lake, for example, they have 6 Tesla chargers there. They're going to now get additional Tesla charging stations and 4 level 3 EV stations from Duke Energy. So again, this is all throughout the turnpike. I think in total there's going to be 8 stations. They're going to have all electric vehicle charging. So whether you drive a Tesla or any other kind of EV, you will be able to, on the turnpike, be able to charge your car right there on the highway, which is fantastic. So again, these 8 stations are all at turnpike stops, rest areas. So you can get in, use the restroom, get a bite to eat, stretch your legs for a few minutes, let your car charge for a bit, and then you can continue driving on your way. So this is really a big deal for Florida. A lot of folks that use these electric charging stations for Tesla have certainly wanted some more. And I think if you're going to Central Florida or you're going to various spots throughout the state, this is really a big deal for those of us here in Florida, and for those who are coming into Florida, traveling down to like where I live here in South Florida. It's great that you can hop on the turnpike from Central Florida and be able to at least find a charging station somewhere on the way.
Awesome. I'd like to see more stations like what they just did in Las Vegas and Kettleman City. You know, where you got the shade under the solar panels, maybe a little barista, get some coffee, some snacks type of thing, other than, you know, the usual places. Most of the chargers I visit and stuff, I mean, it's a little bit of a walk. It's not that big of a deal. But I like what Tesla did in those 2 locations. So looking forward to seeing some more of that stuff. So thank you for that report, Eric.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Right. So the next thing we're going to talk about, Ian, you had a change. You had a mobile service appointment with your Model 3. And it had to do with your charge port.
Correct.
And I grabbed some of your pictures off your Twitter feed there, so thank you very much. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah, so this past winter, I had a couple of minor incidents with the plug charging, with the plug freezing in the charge port, as a number of people did, and it was largely eliminated by that software update we got. I think it was in December, maybe late November, early December. I don't remember what, but there was 2 updates we got at the same time. Right, one of them was it would, as soon as the car was finished charging, it would unlock the actuator pin. So while the plug and everything was still warm, it unlocks. So there's no chance of the plug being, locked in there. Because what happens is that little actuator pin that comes in from the bottom, it's like a little piston, and it comes up and it grabs.
Locking pawl.
It's a locking pawl, exactly, is the right term for it, to lock the plug on the car so you can't unplug it. So as soon as the car was finished charging, that retracts, and now you can go ahead. But I was still having some issues on and off when I'm using the J1775, the SAE adapter, to use a standard EV charger like we had at work previously, or still do, and it would intermittently lock my adapter in place. And I've driven home a couple of times with the little charge port door flapping in the wind, like a seagull wing, as it's trying to close, and eventually gives up and just goes limp. And then when I finally got home, I'd go in there and there's an emergency cable you can pull and you can finally release it. But even that, has been a little bit problematic. So when the tech was installing my rear spoiler a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned this to him. He says, "Oh, well, we should get you the updated charge port." And I was like, "Oh, I know they'd been working on one, but it's out." So there's actually been 3 versions of this. There's the original ones that have been in the car for the first year and a half of production. They then created what's called a version 2, which had a more robust seal on it, but apparently I think it was a rubber seal, and with the type of lubricant that they were using, what I was explained to me was they would still have some problems with the seal expanding depending on temperature and weather conditions, whatever. So it wasn't ideal. And the 3rd generation one is apparently the one to have, and that's what I had installed. And if you look at the picture, what you'll see is interesting about it. The large blow up of the the actual charge port actuator itself, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's sort of an orangey colored little
I've got the picture up
rectangle.
here, yeah.
That's a drain. So there's
Oh.
actually a hole at the bottom of it. It's got a little, what you see, that orangey color is actually a little sponge. It
Okay.
acts as a filter, so nothing can get in there, but it allows water to drain out the bottom of the unit. And that was the key problem on the original design, was there was no drain for the actuator, so water could build up in there, but it had nowhere to go.
Yeah, because the charge port on the Model 3 is more angled up.
Yeah.
Like on the S and the X, it's flat, right?
Right.
I've never had any issues with sticking. But
That's it.
yeah, on the
So, but
Model 3,
water
it's different.
can infiltrate, and if it runs down the pin, down the pawl, it'll eventually pile up in there. And that's what was happening to mine. Is the actual actuator motor would freeze, and a lot of people had that same issue. So, if you've ever had any issues with that, get in touch with Tesla Service and request this new unit. It's the 3rd revision unit, and that will take care of all of this. It's got apparently a silicone type seal. The tech was telling me they're amazing. Like, you will no longer have any problems at all with this actuator.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you for that report. We always like to hear about improvements. I mean, it's kind of what Tesla does, right? They improve parts as they go. They don't wait for another model year. If you have a problem, they just come out and do it. All right. Well, we've come to the part on the podcast where we like to answer viewer and listener questions. As always, we ask for questions on Twitter the day of, or sometimes the day before. We put out a Google form.
Just before we get to that, Trev, do we want to talk about the inverters?
Oh, yes, very quickly. Yes, please do.
I will.
Go ahead.
So, no, just because we touched on it last week, and there's been a lot of talk. People last little while have wanted to know, if you have a regular dual motor car, can you do a software update to get the config for a performance Model 3 and achieve the same performance? And I've always thought that no, it's highly unlikely that would be possible. The inverters are supposed to be different. Elon tweeted out originally when the car was announced that yes, it has a special silicon carbide inverter, one of many things that differentiate it. So no one's ever confirmed that. And I've asked techs, all sorts of people. No one's been able to even tell
I got
me
an email
100%.
from Tesla this week. I emailed them on it specifically, and they did confirm it does have a different inverter.
Exactly. Well, Inside EVs had published an article on this, and Tesla came back to them and said, yes, 100%, it is a unique inverter, so you cannot upgrade a dual motor car. You'd have to have those inverters, and even then, I don't know if they're going to sell them to you, and would you be able to get the software? There's a whole big to-do about it. So there you go. Case closed, myth busted. It is a different inverter. That's the deal.
Yeah. Okay, well, getting back to what we were going to do before, and that's to answer viewer and listener questions. First question comes, well, none other than our good friend Jay Pace, who we just met this past weekend. His question is, do you think Tesla will ever build convertible versions of the Model S and the Model 3? If not, is there any technical reason why they couldn't be on Tesla's penchant for reducing complexity in their production process? Do you think it's just demand-based? Anything is possible. Right now, if you want a convertible, you got to plunk down some major money for a Roadster. I don't think there's any technical issues when they can't do that. I think it's just a matter of priorities, engineering priorities, demand. So I think right now for the short term, you want a convertible, it's going to be the Roadster. Unless, I mean, Elon has confirmed finally again for the umpteenth time there's not going to be updates on the interior on the S and the X now, which I find very depressing, but that's just a story for another day. So yeah, any thoughts, guys? Or
to me, it really comes down to are the cars any safer, or do you sacrifice integrity of the structure of the vehicle?
Well, obviously not with the Roadster. If they're going to build
the Roadster, no. But it's still. I mean, look, the Roadster could be a beast of a car that we haven't seen yet.
It's carbon fiber.
I don't know. I think if there was a way to do it, they would have done it already. I think part of it is aerodynamics. I mean, we know the Model 3 is the most efficient car they've designed. It's also the safest car they've designed. Is going convertible in any of those models going to change that? I would think it does. I would think the vehicles would not be as strong. I mean, the initial roof tests of the Model S were like, if you took 5 Model S's and you stack it on the roof of a Model S, only then do you kind of start going,
yeah,
a convertible top, you can't do that. So, and I know these cars are hard to roll over, but we know what happens. There was the accident just that reported earlier this week where there was a car that fell 40 feet the driver had a seizure.
The kids' playground, yeah.
Right. So it was a vacant playground and the kids were not there. So thankfully the driver of that car walked away, but it was a medical emergency that led to car to basically plummeting 40 feet. And he thanked Elon and credited Tesla for the strength of that car, for saving his life. But I don't know. I just immediately revert back to, is this going to be as safe a vehicle? And I don't think it would be.
Okay. All right, next question comes from Tim. He says, regarding driver profiles, page 40 of the manual says, to see what settings are associated with a driver profile, touch the driver profile icon on top of the touchscreen, then touch See What's Saved. A pop-up window lists all the settings that are saved to driver profiles. However, I don't see What's Saved option. Does that option even exist? Is there some other place I'm supposed to be looking? That's a really good question. You guys have any thoughts on that? I've never seen that personally myself.
I've never seen it. The only thing I know is when you touch your name, you can see other profiles. You simply go into your profile setting, and then you can see what's there. So I don't know.
At first, when I read the question, I thought he meant like, if you touch the driver profile, like at what point do you save the stuff? That's when you make a change. Steering wheel, mirrors, whatever, it'll pop down and ask you to save. But obviously, that's not what he's asking here.
I mean, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we're saying then touch See What's Saved. I've never seen that message. Have you guys?
No, never seen it.
That's the missing element to me.
Well, sorry, Tim. Don't know what the answer is to that one. I've never seen it myself, too. So maybe it's a future or a feature that was removed or not implemented yet. Who knows? So
you know what I would say? I would say, hey, Tim, point that out to Tesla. Let their support team know. Maybe it's something that is archived and is not present in the vehicle software. And maybe they'd want to know that, hey, that's in there, and they can make the edits themselves and update it. So if we don't know the answer, there may not be an answer. But if Tesla support knows, then they can certainly tell you. But if it's wrong, then they'll make the change and you can get credit.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, our next question comes from John. He says, if you were not planning to ever join the robo-taxi fleet, would you still upgrade to FSD? The only advantage would be the new chip, correct? I don't find that NOA is reliable in my busy SoCal area. First of all, I have no intentions of putting my car in the robo-taxi fleet.
Neither do I.
The advantage of paying for FSD is, yes, you do get the new computer, provided your car needs the upgrade. Cars that are currently in production don't need the upgrade. They already come with the computer. Now, as far as NOA, NOA, navigate on Autopilot, which is essentially FSD, which is the second part for city streets and stuff. That's a different matter altogether. I think whether you see an advantage to FSD or not, I think, and this is something that I've been encountering lately in discussions with various people, is that FSD is fast becoming much like just enhanced autopilot. If your car doesn't have it, your resale value is just not going to be there. It's almost tantamount to part of the resale value of the car. So if you are thinking about possibly changing cars in the near future, one can make an argument that will help your resale value. How much? Who knows? But I do know from conversations, as I said, with multiple people, that one of the first questions people ask when you're selling a used car, does it have autopilot? And if it doesn't, most people walk away. So it's that important to people. So going forward, I think FSD is going to fall into that bucket as soon as it becomes real, though. Not right now.
I don't see it that way. I really don't.
You don't?
I think so. Think of it this way: say you're house hunting, okay? Which I know in Canada this is not maybe not as commonplace. I don't know. So forgive me if I'm wrong. But do you guys have pools in people's backyards in Canada?
Of course.
Above ground pools, right? Because if the ground freezes, bad.
No. We have both.
Because I just know in a lot of
we don't live in igloos, Eric.
No, but a lot of the homes in New England don't have below ground pools because the ground freezes and that could actually crack the pool. And the point being is that if a house has a pool, that the value of the house is higher. Okay, because it's like it's an appreciating asset. So say you have a house and you go, hey, we're going to maybe 10 years down the road, we want to be able to put the house in the market. Well, how can we increase the value of the house? Well, there's always renovations and whatnot. But one of the things that a lot of Floridians do is that let's go get a pool. The problem is you're spending all that capital up front with zero guarantee you're going to recoup any of that money down the road. Zero guarantee. So it is a calculated risk to do that. To me,
Kitchens and bathrooms.
To me, full self-driving is the exact same thing. There is zero guarantee that when you have that added into the car, it's going to in any way affect the value of your vehicle. And I'll tell you why. One of it is regulatory approval. Because let's say, for example, I actually get approval in Georgia, okay? But here in Florida, a neighboring state, it's not allowed. Let's just say. Because honestly, this is going to be a state-by-state regulatory thing. So if it's approved in Georgia and not in Florida, even if I have it, my car will have a greater resale value in Georgia, where I don't live, versus having it here in Florida, where I do. So that's the first thing. The second thing is some people may not be able to afford, and we know that FSD is going to continue going higher and higher and higher as time goes on. It's going to get to the point where a lot of folks who are looking to get into the market for EVs are going to go, I can't afford to get this car and get Autopilot and get full self-driving. So it's, if you can get it, fine. I, for one, don't want to get it because I already have a $60,000 car. I'm not going to add on another $7,000 for full self-driving that I can't use for some period of time and don't know when I will be able to use it. So for the meanwhile, I'm out of that money up front that I could use for 1,000 other things for something that we do not yet know when will actually be usable across this country. So if I wanted to take a road trip to Canada, for example, from Florida, there may be half the country where I can't even use FSD to begin with, which makes the value of FSD depreciated for the time that I actually have it. So that's some of my concerns initially. 5 years from now, different conversation. But today,
Well, that's what I said at the end of my little bit.
No, I know, but
today.
Yeah, but I mean, again, but that's the thing though. Like to put to the point of this question, would you get FSD? My answer is no. Because I have zero idea. If FSD was already a thing and it was already legalized across, let's say, just North America between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico, then maybe, yeah, you can make an argument that you should get it. Right now, I can't make an argument in favor of it. I just can't.
No,
and I think it's great, and it's feature dependent, which Elon said that they're hoping to have most of those features rolled out by the end of the year. But I'm also grandfathered in with certain features of EAP that FSD now has.
That's
so
true.
I don't need to get FSD. So it just depends also what car you have.
Okay, all good points. All right, we got to move on here. Next question comes from Jeff. He says, is the steering column of the Model 3 wired for a heated steering wheel? Would an aftermarket heated wheel be a simple install, or would it require some major wire work? Now, first of all, I am not aware that the Model 3 has a heated steering wheel. Again, I haven't taken one out apart, so I don't really know. He's asking, short of somebody putting a cover on the wheel that might be heated, you plug in a cigarette lighter, it would be a major, major undertaking to implement it into the car, especially if you want something on screen to be able to turn it on and off. I mean, obviously, unless you're a hacker and you have root access to the car, you're not adding any features to the operating system to be able to enable something like that, especially if it's not exposed and Tesla hasn't even implemented it. Now, there's lots of hackers out there who have done all kinds of things to the car, but yeah, until we see any evidence otherwise, I don't think it's possible at this point.
I don't think it is. I mean, it's got half the wiring of the Model S. The Model S had that Sub-Zero package. I don't see the Model 3 being capable of doing it.
No,
I think
the expensive part of the system would be the wiring to feed it, and also there's like that ring connector on the back of the wheel that has a certain number of tracks, and that would be by far the highest current draw item. Everything else, is microscopic basically for the the switches.
It's not to preclude that they can't do it in the future, because the cars do evolve over time, and Tesla has been known to add and change and delete features as they go. So keep an eye if that's something that's important to you. Well, I mean, in the future, who knows what Tesla will do. All right, next question comes from Dion. He says, do you think Tesla can bring out an update, that will allow the car to come to a complete stop when we let off the accelerator like a Nissan Leaf? Do you think Tesla not allowing unlimited supercharging with the older model cars will make it harder to trade in the car at a non-Tesla dealership? Well, that's two questions. So the first question is, can Tesla do it? Yes, of course they can.
Part number one, I'll give you a condition on that. I think it can only be done on the dual motor cars because you need an AC induction motor to be able to regen to zero.
Right. Yes.
I don't think the partial permanent magnet motor does that. That's the reason the regen gets so weak on the cars as you get down below 10 miles an hour. So probably on a dual motor, but I don't think on a rear-wheel drive.
Could Tesla increase the regen aggressivity on the car?
Sure.
I would like
in
to see
track
that.
mode, my car, you should, I mean, you never drove mine in track mode. It
No.
regens
I
like
drove
a
it home the
beast.
other night, but not in
Yeah.
track mode.
Well, it regen, you go from 0.2 Gs maximum capability to 0.3 Gs. That's a 50% increase in regen. You drop the
Oh.
pedal, man, it's like, woo, yeah, your head's going towards the windshield there. It's not
Oh,
like
nice.
braking.
Why didn't
but
you
it's-
tell me that?
What?
You didn't tell me that.
What
I
do you-
would have totally did that.
Oh, okay. Well, next time.
It makes
Something
me
to look
want a
forward to.
car even more now.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what he's talking about is the one pedal driving mode, which is
Yeah.
very similar to what the i3 does too. I mean, once you get used to it, it's actually quite nice. Now,
Mm-hmm.
on the Nissan Leaf, I know that they use a blended mode, so it's part regen and it's part brakes as well. So, all right. So he was asking his second question. We'll indulge Dion here. We'll answer the second question. Do you think Tesla not allowing unlimited supercharging with older model cars will make it harder to trade in the car at a non-Tesla dealership?
No.
No, not really. It's just one of those things. I mean, the cost is fairly low, all things considered, especially now, and I've been able to verify this, that if you get referrals, the free supercharging that you get is applicable to any car that you have in your Tesla account, whether it exists there today or not. So if you sell a car and you buy a new one and it doesn't come with free supercharging or it never did, you get the free supercharging on the car. So get out there and spread some Tesla word and get some referrals. That's the way to get some free supercharging.
Well, also news recently that they basically killed their free supercharging with older cars. So
Inventory.
right, exactly.
Yes.
And that was the thing too. So if they're already doing it to their own inventory cars, I'm less concerned that this is going to be an issue moving forward. Because I mean,
Eventually,
I
it'll just become the norm and people just be used to it.
right. I mean, like it's not like sales at car dealerships are down because you don't get a free tank of gas with your car. You know what I mean? Like it's not that big a deal. And considering the cost of charging to be precipitously lower than the cost of gasoline, especially when in places like Canada you're paying by the liter, not by the gallon.
Thank God for
I
that.
don't really think it's going to hurt their sales in any way. It was a nice benefit. It was a good sales incentive.
It was a perk. It's an incentive,
Yeah,
right?
that's
And
all it
it
is,
doesn't
but-
preclude them doing it again. But that part of that though too is if you listen to the investor call or read the letter, that a significant amount of the profit loss or their losses that they took was writing off. Well, not writing off, but doing that massive price reduction on in the existing inventory. They had to clear out a lot of those cars, so that took a major hit on them too because they wanted to clear out, to make room for all the new Raven vehicles that are out now. So
Not only that, the quote unquote demand problem, there isn't one.
no, there's no demand problem.
So if if their numbers are as high as they are, record numbers for Q2 in 2019, there's no problem if free supercharging is not a thing.
Okay. Next question. We got three more here. So Kim writes in. She says, I've been seeing online that we can order the Model 3 Performance with 18-inch aero wheels and non-performance brake pads. Brakes. Is this option available in Canada and what a price? So I asked Tesla about this, and as it turns out, Tesla made a small batch of these performance cars that have been decontented. And that's why it's off menu now, and you can't even order it anymore. So it was a one-time deal. Not to say that they can't do it in the future, but it was a small batch. It was never available in Canada. It was just down in the U.S. So as far as I understand, they were snapped up just like that. So that's why you can't see it.
Funny you mentioned that. My buddy Mike Triffin, who just bought his 3 rear-wheel drive, I guess about a month and a half ago, was down at the dealership and asked them specifically, or he might have called them, my apologies. But in any case, the Montreal store seemed under the impression that you could still get one. And I had never seen it anywhere because in the US, what had happened was for a brief period of time, when you went in, right after they did the price drop, you could see there was a fine print thing.
Yes.
I think it was on the wheel page where you saw the specifications of the wheel, and it was like a little fine print thing saying that you could, change out the wheels for the 18-inch. And then, we all went around in circles trying to figure out, well, what the hell does that mean to the rest of the hardware of the car? But the salesman at Montreal confirmed what you just said, Chad. It was basically, it reverts back to like a base Performance 3 as we understood it originally. It's basically a dual motor car with performance drivetrain. So the only thing it has beyond the regular dual motor. Yeah, it's got the hot inverters, and it's unlocked to give maximum performance.
I'm actually looking at the Tesla website in the U.S., and there's no way to order that decontented car. It's not available anymore.
No, the fine print's gone, right?
Yeah, it's gone. It's
That's
completely gone. Well, here, you want proof? There you go. It's nowhere to be seen. There's the little American flag there. See it? Can't see it. Anyways, yeah, so nowhere to be seen, unfortunately. So it looks like it was a short-term thing, maybe just a little perk and stuff, but unfortunately can't order it anymore. There were more than just the wheels. There was, the brakes. Track mode was not there anymore, so there's quite a bit of stuff that was decontented on that car. So yeah, it was short-lived. All right, moving on. Next question comes from Chris. He says, did any of you with the Model 3 notice a backup camera change after the last update? Seems to show a larger field of view, but it's more washed out. Now, he doesn't mention what software he's running. I should mention that the latest update, which is 2019.24.4, is in wide release now. That gives you the new Sketchpad, which is kind of fun. And Chatamo support now on the Model 3. So for those of you who are looking on going off the beaten path, you finally got it. It's too bad we didn't have it last week when Ian was here.
I know.
Yes. So unfortunately, Chris doesn't mention what software. Oh, by the way, folks, if you ever write in with questions, I would suggest if you're asking for firmware-related questions, make sure you mention to us what firmware you're on so we know what track you're on there. I have seen a bunch of Twitter reports, and on the forum, of course, a lot of people are mentioning that the camera colors have definitely changed. I think Michael Tesla Tunity's mentioned that as well. Have you guys seen any differences?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
So I got 24.4. I want to say it was yesterday or Tuesday.
It's in wide release, so most of it went out in the last 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I want to say it was either Tuesday or Wednesday when I got it. And I drove the car. I looked at it again more thoroughly this morning. The field of view is not significantly larger. It's certainly discernible, but it's not significant. And there is more of a natural hue as far as a very bright look at the camera. I actually thoroughly enjoy it because it's more of what your eyes would see versus sort of like a camera effect to make it look a lot brighter, which actually makes the in-car look at the screen. You're not squinting as much, going, whew, that's a bright camera. So it's been reported. Some people see like a bluish hue or a yellowish tint to it, depending upon how your car's in the lights. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't faze me. It doesn't bother me. I think it's noticeable, but I think it's a change for the better.
These software updates are amazing. You remember how bad the backup camera image was on the Model 3 when it first came out?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, they made huge improvements. So I'm glad to see that. My only concern with the Model 3 is being horizontal screen. It would be nice to have some kind of split screen view when you put it in reverse so you could get at least some of the maps. Some people like to drive with the camera up. I mean, it's more possible on the S or the X with the vertical screen and stuff. But plus the other fact, too, it'd be nice to be able to get the side cameras to pop up when you put put your blinkers on or you do
that I would
any
love.
kind of collision warning. That would be really nice. Yeah. Okay, last question of the evening comes from Serge. He says, being that many people did the Tesla stretch, that's a real thing, to be able to afford the long-range Model 3 last year, but it couldn't afford the additional $5,000 US or $6,600 Canadian for Autopilot, do you think Tesla will ever offer a low-cost basic Autopilot for us, similar to FSD deal for EAP customers in March? I'm going to say anything is possible with Tesla. I think they've been saying that eventually, Elon did say on Twitter that they would eventually make a subscription service for FSD where you could do a monthly fee, but that would probably preclude you having to put the car into the robotaxi fleet, so to speak. So right now, I don't see it happening right now because, it's about money and doing... Yeah, I don't know how to answer this. I think it's going to be possible in the future, but right now I don't see them doing it.
It's
not a priority.
Right?
Yeah, well, anything is possible. You're absolutely right. But this is a slightly different question because we've been so focused on what's going to happen to the price of FSD, right? That's the big ticket item. That's what everybody gets excited about. But in Selja's case, this is like he doesn't even have basic autopilot, which is now included in the car. It's like, so could they ever offer it again? It's like, I think it's 4,000 after the if you have a car with zero autopilot now and you just want basic autopilot, I think it's 4,000 Canadian. So I assume it's around 3 and change US. The question would be, would there ever be a fire sale price on that? So you never know with Tesla, right? It's like
not without upsetting a lot of people.
It's never going to happen in the next month. Look what happens. It's like, hey, people didn't get it last year.
I would say Tesla changes prices and stuff as often as we change socks. And I sometimes change my socks twice a day. So it is, I mean, I'm a runner. So, but the thing too with all of this is, and I want to say this to the audience at large, we get a lot of great questions that deal with the hypotheticals that all we can really do at best is speculate based on Tesla's history. And oftentimes their history is indicative of what's going to happen down the road. For example, will price of blank car change? Probably.
Yes.
Will price of this feature change? Yes. Will new features roll out for these cars? Probably. So all these things are going to change. We say this almost on a weekly basis, it seems like. We should probably just call the show the Tesla Owners Online Change is Inevitable podcast. Even sometimes our guests on the show change. So we value the questions. We're glad we're getting them. I'm sure there are other listeners who have the same thoughts that some of you do out there. But just know that a lot of times we're merely speculating because we have as much information as you, the public, do, which is, oh, that's right, 0.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah, but again, they're good thought experiments to see what could happen. But I think Tesla's so focused on why semi-truck right now and the Roadster to some degree, getting those really into mass production over the coming years, that these little things, prices, software updates, battery technology, the wiring conversation we talked about a little while ago, those are, I think, important projects, but they're side projects. They don't take as much precedence as everything else. Ideally, they're trying to figure out how can we maximize our profits and earnings, lower our capex so we're able to make that more value, reduce our debt to our vendors and what have you, and ideally just make sure that the company's in good footing. Which, again, a year ago it was precarious. Today they're doing great. So as long as that trend continues, the things that we're clamoring for, which, by the way, I wanted to remind people, if you're not on Twitter and you are accessing the Tesla Owners Online Forum, there is an ongoing thread. If you have recommendations for features you want to see in your Tesla vehicles, go onto the forum, submit your responses there. We're going to aggregate what's in that thread and on a quarterly basis submit it to Tesla. So hopefully that their design team, their engineers, blah, 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 can essentially look at those recommendations and see if anything is possible. Our friend Bonnie Norman is also doing her own thread on Twitter, so you can submit the same ideas to both lists. There's no reason why you can't do that. But just know that if you're on Twitter or if you're just on the forum, you can submit your ideas of things that you want to see. So sometimes you ask us, hey, is this a thing that Tesla could do? One of the ways of making sure that happens is by submitting that very idea into one of those two lists, if not both, and that way Tesla can at least be shared that list with them. Yeah,
you'll be able to find that under the software and firmware subforum. It's tagged. It's right at the top. So put your submissions in there. I spoke to Bonnie today about it. We're going to aggregate all of our information. I'll pass it along to her. She's going to aggregate it along. So just a little bit more exposure. She's been doing her thing on Twitter, but we know not everybody's on Twitter. We have people on the forum and stuff. So people on the podcast. So if you have a feature request, because with Tesla, there's no way to submit your feature requests, only if you catch Elon on Twitter, which is kind of few and far between. So we have a facility. Bonnie has a facility. So we're going to put our brains together. And Bonnie has all the contacts. So she's going to take all that stuff and send it in. So yes, I'll put a link down in the video description, the podcast description. If you don't feel like Googling it, I'll put it down in there.
Oh, one last thing before we go.
Please do.
Happy birthday to Trevor's mom.
Yes. My mommy's birthday today. And I know that she watches the videos. I talked to her today. Dad's taking her out for dinner. So it's all good. So anyways, happy birthday, Mom. Love you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Trevor's mom.
Yep. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the show. Since, Eric, you're on the screen, why don't you take point, tell us where people can find you if they want to have a chit-chat with you.
All right, folks, if you're watching this video on YouTube, you can see my tag here in the corner. That is ECFix on Twitter. If you're listening to the podcast on your favorite audio format, hey, thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, unsubscribe, resubscribe. Help the channel out however which way you can.
Don't unsubscribe, please.
Comment on iTunes, all that good stuff are all there. Anyway, but again, you can find me on Twitter at the handle ECFix. That is ECFIX. So thanks so much.
Excellent. How about you, Eric? Ian, where can people chit-chat with you?
Twitter, the handle is at Ian Pavelko, fairly obvious. The Tesla Owners Online Forum, you can find me. The handle is Mad Hungarian, if you want to hit me up for any questions or discussion, what have you. And then finally, if you are in need of some Tesla wear, you can go to Teespring, all one word, .com, and look up the Mad Hungarian Evolveware shop. It's a little online store, and you can buy a variety of different Tesla shirt designs, and the proceeds go to a good cause to support l'AVEC, Association des Véhicules Électriques de Québec, the Electromobility Canada, and Plug in America in the US.
Excellent. And, well, you can find me on Twitter. The handle is Model 3 Owners, and obviously on the forum, my handle is TrevP, so please go and check that out, TeslaOwnersOnline.com. I want to say a big thank you to our sponsors, the guys at HeavenX, Dulaban Insurance, and Fineland Ceramic Coatings. Those guys are awesome. And lastly, to our Patreon supporters, if you'd like to support the show, just check it out, patreon.com/Model 3 Owners Club. We support... any little bit you can give us keeps the show going and stuff. So I'm the recipient of a chocolate chip cookie. So I'm now going to sign off and eat this.
Of course you are.
Yep.
All right, folks.
Meg.
Yeah. Anyways, thanks for listening and watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you guys. Good night.
Bonsoir tout le monde.
Goodbye, world.